And the most important part of this low cost, low vision is not to forget that importance of providing a positive psychosocial message. One very effective service that developed in the UK is called the Eye Clinic Liaison Officer. It's providing a very initial, in the hospital clinic, point of contact for someone who's just been delivered with very distressing news. And a lot of that social message is also about helping the person to understand the nature of their sight loss. You know, if the individual can actually understand what is happening, what's going wrong, why they can see certain things and not see other things, why they can see things more easily if they move their eye or direct their gaze away. To understand that difference between acuity and field loss. Most people in the public who don't understand think that poor sight is just things looking blurred, things being more difficult to see when they're smaller. And too often I go in and I see that friendly relative has bought them the 54-inch colour television. It's bigger, it's going to be easier to see. And the person says, well, I've got a reduced field of view. The only way I can see it now is to keep moving my head all the time because it's just too big for me. I can't see it. And it's because people don't understand or think about two important aspects of vision. One aspect is acuity and one is field loss. And of course, for many people, strongly associated with AMD is Charles Bonnet syndrome. For many, a very frightening reaction or response to deteriorating sight. Although, again, I think this comes again from Holland, but people kind of get visions and very kind of disturb visual occurrences. But I heard this story of an elderly gentleman, and what he saw were naked women coming down the street. And he said, well, I don't want it to go away. I actually quite enjoy it. It's quite a nice thing to see. But for other people, they can really be very disturbing. And we need to understand that and help people to realize that it's not unusual with their condition, and to try and explain and to help them to address what can be, for most, very distressing, but for one Dutch gentleman, really quite enjoyable. And I think this would be right to Dennis's heart here, peer support. The one thing which is really important to older people when they're losing their vision is someone to talk to and someone to listen, but that someone is someone who's been there, done it, and got the T-shirt, someone who's been there. And that really, in terms of planning a low vision service, is one of the most effective elements to make sure we involve people who've been there and can talk with a degree of empathy which sighted people like me can never, ever do. So I want to finish with just a couple of very brief projects. There is a leaflet about this in your pack. It's called INTERGEN, which is short for Intergenerational Knowledge and Exchange, and details about the website. This was a European project supported by the European Blind Union. It involves colleagues in France, Germany, Italy, and Turkey. The project ran from 2008 to 2010. And what it involved was bringing in exchange young and elderly visually impaired people to share and learn together. And I remember, in fact, one of my previous visits to Rome was to actually see the workshop here run by the Italian Organisation for the Blind. And it involved younger blind people with their mobile phones, with speech, teaching older blind people who just couldn't get to grips with this new technology. And then there was an elderly blind lady who was sitting down with a young blind Italian girl, showing her how she used to darn and sew, a skill which this young blind girl had not learnt before. So a great opportunity intergenerationally for people to learn and to share together. We've created a guide and we've created a manual, and this is now available on the website, and the links are all there. And this is our new and exciting project. It was just launched last month. It's called VISAL, which stands for Visually Impaired Seniors Active Learning. And the expert group comprises of myself on behalf of RNIB, Royal Dutch Visio, and Age UK. And our programme and our plan is to develop a training resource to encourage and facilitate older blind people to have an active voice, an active participation, not only in civil society, but in organisations. And as we develop this, we will be testing it in Austria, Slovakia, and Croatia and the UK. Now here we have I'm not very good at maths, but I've got a mathematical formula, because our challenge is to get older people motivated. So motivation equals, and we're calling it the individual estimation of success, multiplied by the value of the outcome. And it's divided by the cost or the barrier. So if you want to get an older person with a sight loss to be motivated to become engaged, basically the benefit has to outweigh the cost. Now the cost might be in their time, in just the sheer effort, which for someone who has other physical problems might be a real big effort. But that kind of benefit might be increase to their self-esteem. It might be access to a new social network. It might be access to a new role in life. Have a place back in society. So our programme has got to ensure that we can give sufficient motivation through this programme to ensure that people can fully access and engage. And the final project, which we're hoping will start in 2013, is a link between the Age platform. Age platform is the European-wide group which represents the needs of older people across Europe, with the European Guide Dog Federation and the European Blind Union. And it's called Age-Friendly Cities. Because the challenge for many older people as they lose their sight is how do they access the environment? Not just the kind of built environment, how do they access transport? How do they access information? How do they continue to live independently in the place where they live? Next. The World Health Organization had produced a guideline on age-friendly cities. They surveyed a number of environments and they picked out good examples, and they wrote a guide on what they thought were the kind of parameters which equaled a good place for older people to live. The problem is that guideline didn't take into consideration the needs of older people with a serious sight loss. So what we want to do during 2013, and our plan is to focus on 3 regions, Austria, Germany and Ireland. I want to focus on Austria because Salzburg has some really excellent example. There's a really excellent example of how they've tried to integrate and the transport system to meet the needs of older people. There are good examples in Germany and in Ireland. And we're going to work with groups of older people with age-related sight loss in those 3 countries to review those guidelines, to try and develop an appendix for a European set of guidelines which include what they consider to be their needs. And we'll rewrite the guidelines, we'll test them back with these groups, and we'll also test them in relation to the places where they live to see how close they are to meeting those guidelines. And then we'll be working closely with the Age platform to promote those within the European Union and with governments to try and encourage governments to think about housing, transport, amenities and information to make sure that they take into consideration this growing population who we feel should have the freedom to live and participate as active members of the community. So we have a big challenge, but I think in Europe there's some really exciting things happening, and hopefully you will all be part of that great campaign. Thank you.